Take a moment to visualize that scene. Picture the people who lost their homes overnight and saw their life savings vanish instantly. Think of the retirement funds that evaporated and the sudden loss of hope for the future. People worked for years, saved, and trusted. And then it all simply evaporated. The collapse of those giant banks sent tremors through the financial centers. Amidst all this economic destruction were the silent winners who fed on the anxiety of millions. 2008, it was not just a year when a financial crash happened. It was one of the most ruthless economic events in modern history. But maybe it wasn't just a crash. Perhaps it was a profitable transformation of wealth, deliberately managed by those inside the system. It was a breakdown, yes, but for some it was a time of harvesting. Today we are not just going to talk about the crisis. We are going to talk about reality. Understanding 2008 means understanding who we are today and who controls our future, who manages the world's money. More importantly, who rules us from behind the scenes. Throughout history, economic crises have occurred, ranging from the Great Depression to the dot-com crash to the Asian financial crisis. However, no one was prepared for something as insidiously orchestrated and vast in its impact as the 2008 crisis. Overnight, laws changed, systems collapsed, and millions of families were impoverished in an instant. Those who remember that time know this. Anxiety wasn't just present in financial markets, it was present at every kitchen table and in every bed at night. Suddenly you discovered that all the economic rules you had trusted your whole life were lies. But all this chaos began with a simple, innocent, even sacred dream. The dream of home ownership. It was the early 2000s. The American government encouraged this dream. Politicians said that everyone, even those at the bottom of society, should own a home. Banks were virtually ordered to do one thing: give credit to everyone uncontrollably. This was the sweetest promise of the American dream. But sweet promises can be the most poisonous traps. Is your credit score low? No problem. Do you lack income? The bank would handle that little detail somehow. Yesterday, you were someone who couldn't get a loan. Today, you were told, you can take out $1 million home loan. I ask you, why? Why were they so generous? Because we all believed the same lie, that property values would increase forever. Even in the worst-case scenario, your home would increase in value, and you could sell it to pay off the debt. This belief acted as invisible armor, concealing the fragility of the system. This is where the subprime mortgage system was born. It was a high-risk lending system, but it was more than just lending money to poor people. It was a ticking time bomb at the heart of the financial system, and the countdown had already begun. It wasn't a service, it was a deliberate systemic leak. So how did this bomb explode? The mechanism was clever, ingenious, and terrifying. Banks issued these high-risk, low-quality loans. They knew they were risky, but they weren't holding on to these loans. Immediately after, and this is crucial, they packaged and sold these loans. Ideally, they sold them to giant institutions on Wall Street, where the risk could be hidden behind massive profits. These were called credit packages or mortgage-backed securities, MBS. Hundreds or even thousands of homes, loans, and streams of interest payments were bundled, layered, mixed, and converted into one thing, a profitable product on Wall Street, a kind of financial TNT. Investors who purchased these securities, including pension funds, insurance companies, and even small savings accounts, believed these products were safe. Why did they believe that? Because the rating agencies, Moody's, S&P, and Fitch, gave them an A rating. AA. That means they were considered the safest, the most risk-free, and almost government-guaranteed. Yet, in reality, the hundreds of loans forming the foundation of these products were rotten from the start. Were the rating agencies lying? No, they just chose to ignore the truth. In exchange for labeling these products AAA, the banks paid the agencies millions of dollars. Profit superseded ethical values and common sense. Everyone continued to believe the same lie. The real estate market never falls. The bubble continued to inflate and the profit machine continued to run. The system grew by feeding on its own lies. During 2006 and 2007, the bubbles bursting became audible. First, home prices stalled. Then they began to fall slowly. The dominoes then began to fall. People couldn't pay back $500,000 for a house that was now worth $300,000. Banks were flooded with files of defaulted loans. But those files weren't just stacks of paper anymore. They were toxic chains linked to the global system. It was like a disease that had entered the financial bloodstream. Then the worst thing happened. Panic hit Wall Street. Markets froze. Banks stopped lending to each other. Everyone knew that the bank next to them was holding bundles of toxic credit. No one trusted anyone. Trust is the system's fuel. That fuel was completely depleted. Money flow in the financial system ceased. Until September 15, 2008. Lehman Brothers, one of the world's most established investment banks, declared bankruptcy. The company was $600 billion in debt. That day marked a milestone in world financial history. When people read the headline, "Lehman has fallen," that morning, they witnessed the collapse of modern financial capitalism's grandest showcase. Then, like dominoes, other banks began to falter. Merrill Lynch was sold. The insurance giant AIG was propped up with a massive government bailout package, and Washington Mutual collapsed. Decades of wealth vanished in an instant at a virtual casino table. Millions of people lost their homes and savings. The public was always the loser. But this collapse didn't affect everyone equally. In fact, it added to their fortunes. They had already bet on the collapse. The biggest and most uncomfortable revelation of the 2008 crisis is this. Giant institutions like Goldman Sachs hedged against the risky products they sold to clients as safe investments. In other words, they profited from the collapse of the very securities they had sold. It was akin to a casino selling chips to a customer at the roulette table, while simultaneously betting that the ball would land on black instead of red. As the financial system burned, a handful of people earned billions. Millions lost their homes, savings, and retirement funds. Yet very little changed in the skyscrapers and boardrooms of Wall Street. The system was planning more than just a crash. It was transferring wealth to the very top. Do you know what happened after the crisis? Adhering to the philosophy that they are too big to fail, the government poured hundreds of billions of dollars into the banks. This program was called TARP, Troubled Asset Relief Program. Your tax dollars bailed out the very entities that caused the collapse. However, the government did not help ordinary people who lost their homes and jobs. Why? Because the banks were essential to the system. They said, that's just how the market works. The banks were saved, but the people were sacrificed like pawns. This is the clearest and most brutal proof that money always stays in the same hands. Power protects itself. The 2008 crisis was not just a financial event. It was a story, a warning, a wake-up call. It showed us this. The rules of this game aren't designed for small players to win. We are still living with the effects of that crisis today. The global economy continues to bear the scars from the bursting of the bubble that day. We are still in a debt-based system. They still tell us the economy is growing. But the essential question remains. Growing for whom? On whose backs and on what new debts is this growth being built? True freedom isn't about earning a high salary or having a lot of money. True freedom lies in understanding how money works, who controls it, and when the system is set to crash. If you understand what happened in this video, then you understand not only the 2008 crisis, but also how the system works. Perhaps you would even become powerful enough to predict the next collapse. This knowledge transforms you from a viewer into a player. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. In the next episode, I will reveal another dark chapter in financial history. This time, we will discuss not only the truth, but also ways to defend yourself and strategies to get out of this financial cycle. Until then, stay informed. See you next time.